because we're in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic, one the federal government has botched the response to, November is going to be a mail-in election. And that is why Donald Trump appears to be attacking mail-in voting. In fact, Donald Trump has been waging this war time and time again, week after week on Twitter, today escalating as well. But it's important to understand that there are basically two aspects to what's going on here. What Donald Trump says is that mail-in voting is rife with fraud. And that's not true at all. But there are issues with mail-in voting. It is incredibly administratively difficult. We're going to see mail-in voting volumes, the likes of which we've never seen. It takes longer to process. It's longer to count. There's some evidence, in fact, that a lot of people who give in legitimate mail-in ballots have them discounted because they forgot to sign in the right place. My wife and I both voted recently in an election mail-in ballot in New York, and we had to check it 3 or 4 times. All of that creates the conditions for Donald Trump to take advantage of those actual problems by trying to fight against mail-in ballots. Here to clarify exactly what we can do to make sure this election is as smoothly run as possible and those mail-in ballots are counted is my friend and great reporter on this topic, the #1 expert, Ari Berman of Mother Jones. Ari, good to see you.
Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to talk about these two categories because Donald Trump did something totally insidious today, which is he conflated the two. Like, the odds of someone cheating or systematic fraud from mail ballot is 0. The odds that there are real administrative problems with local election officials being able to process them, send them out in time, get them through the mail in time, and count them in time, and that people's votes are counted, those are real. Talk about those sort of two distinct issues.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Mail-in ballot fraud is very unlikely. The Conservative Heritage Foundation, which is a strong supporter of the president, did a study and found only 143 cases of mail ballot fraud over the past 20 years, which equals out to 0.0006% of total ballots cast. The problem is that the system could become overwhelmed, that people might not get mail ballots that they requested, that those ballots might not be sent back in time and they might not be counted, that the post office is facing this unprecedented threat that you've covered on your show, that they might not be able to handle the volume of mail ballots, that election officials might not be able to count them in a proper and timely fashion. All of those are the real threats to mail voting. That's why we should be making it easier to vote by mail, not harder. But the Trump administration is waging this unprecedented campaign against mail voting to make it more difficult, which will then increase the risk that ballots will be thrown out in November.
Right. I want people to understand this just in how insidious it is, right? The idea is to make it harder, to exacerbate problems so that you can then turn around and point to the problems and cast the legitimacy in question, right? So that if election night comes and we still have to count a bunch of ballots, like he said today, and it takes a bunch of days, that's where the ability of lawsuits or the president railing against the election being stolen, like that's where the rubber hits the road.
Exactly. And Trump is saying all of these mail ballots are going to be thrown out. Well, they're going to be thrown out because the Trump administration in every single swing state is litigating to make it harder to vote by mail. So they're saying that your ballot has to arrive by Election Day instead of being postmarked by Election Day. Or they're saying that ballots should be thrown out for little things like mismatched signatures, or that election officials shouldn't be able to contact you if there's a problem with your ballot. In Pennsylvania, they've gone as far to say that you shouldn't be able to drop your ballot off at drop boxes, which is just the most insane, crazy thing that I've ever heard. So Trump is creating the conditions for mail voting to fail.
You know, we were going to get to how to operationalize what you can do, your power. One of the things I've heard of this tip is that if your state allows you to drop off your absentee ballot, go do that. You're saying Pennsylvania, the Trump administration is suing there, or is it state legislators in Republican state legislators in Pennsylvania who don't want you to be able to drop it off in a drop box?
No, the Trump administration is suing in Pennsylvania to not allow you to drop your ballot off, claiming that it's somehow going to be rife with fraud. Yeah, it's crazy. And the misnomer about vote by mail in places like Oregon that have done it for decades is that everyone puts it through the mail. Well, in Oregon, actually, a lot of people drop their ballots off. And one thing that election officials are telling you is request your ballot early and drop it off, if possible, at an election office or at these drop boxes like they have in Oregon, like they have in Colorado, to put less stress on the post office at a time when the Trump administration is trying to do everything they can to destroy the post office when it's needed more than ever.
So there is one thing, right? So there are certain things outside of our control and that are going to depend on mobilization and lawyers. But there are certain things I think that are important for people to understand for themselves. The vast majority of states have no excuse absentee balloting right now. There are some holdouts there. And there's this idea that I thought is like flatten the curve, right? It's based on the flatten the curve that we saw with the pandemic, which is to flatten the ballot curve. And the idea here is if everyone waits until the last minute to apply for a mail-in absentee ballot, you will overwhelm the logistical capacity of your local election administrators. But if people start doing it now and you space it out over time, it will be a smoother operation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. First off, you're correct. In more than 40 states, you can vote by mail for any reason, which includes basically every important swing state in the country. So vote by mail is set up to work in all of those states. But you're right. You have to request your ballot early. You have to return it early. The Postal Service is saying do all of that 15 days before the election. Fill it out carefully. Make sure you sign your ballot. Make sure you sign it clearly. Drop it off if possible. If people are proactive about vote by mail, if they're careful about vote by mail, if states invest in the resources for vote by mail, we'll have a smooth election. If we don't do all of those things, there's a very real risk of major disenfranchisement in November.
Yeah, that's the major disenfranchisement, just to hammer this home, that is the risk here, the thing to be battled against. Not fraud, but disenfranchisement is precisely the end result the president is trying to bring about through all this subversion of the legitimacy of the form itself. Ari Berman, who's been a must follow on this, who's been writing about voting rights for years and one of the best reporters on this beat. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it.